Rick going to be telling you some more stories, things that I've heard about, and I want to keep them in memory. I want to talk about Will Moore, the first man I want to talk about. Will lived on the Crane Fork. He lived about probably a half a mile up in there. He lived right where you turn up to where Preston Sebastian used to live. Lived in that field down towards Lonzo Sandling. And Will Moore was a prominent man. He had a boy named Charlie Moore. Charlie made a doctor, a surgeon, and he spent most of his life probably in Colorado, I think, where he lived. Jasper Mays told me this story, and I want to put it on here. And I want to talk some more about Will Moore. Jasper said he lived on Will's land, a house down the creek about a half a mile, and maybe not hardly that far. And he said Charlie Moore he's a making up Sweet Tater Hills. And he said Charlie come down there and he said, Jasper, I want you to help me take my mother's leg off. Jasper said, Charlie, I wouldn't be no count at something like that. He said, you'll be good, you can hand me stuff, I'll show you what to do. He said he went up there, and he said they laid her on the eating table in the kitchen, of course put a spread under and whatever. And he said that Charlie put the chloroform on her, put her to sleep. And he said he started and going to take it off at the knee joint, of course. And he said Charlie split the skin, pulled it back, and then he done whatever else he had to do, and he had a little surgical saw. And Jasper said he watched him and said he started sawing. And he said she never moved till it got into the mire of the bone, and she tried to surge. He said he gave her more chloroform. And he said he got it on off, and it was gangrene in it. And he told Will, he said, we'll lay it over there and we'll build a fire and burn it after a while. Get rid of it. And he said, no, I want to bury it. I said, that'll be fine. Well, Jasper said he got the skin all pulled down and sewed back. And he said he got to moving her around, it looked, and he said, oh my God, no. Found a big black place up next to her, went just below her hip joint. And he said, I'm going to have to take it off in her hip. Will told him, said, no, just let her die the way she is. And Jasper said they did. They put her in the bed, and I don't know how long she lived. I never heard Jasper say. And Harold Mays is Jasper's son. He'll vouch for what I'm telling you. He said he'd heard his dad tell it a many of a time. A man had removed his own mother's leg. In them days, you didn't go to the hospital much. There wasn't no way to get you there, and you just had to do the best you could.
What year would that have been, Lowell?
That would have been, I'd say that would have been in the 20s probably, in the 1920s. Now let me tell you something else happened to Will Moore. He got to having bad luck around his farm. His cows got to having dead calves. They got to giving blanky milk. Everything was happening bad. And one night, John B. Lewis come along there. Old man John B. was an old traveling preacher. And John B. was a Universalist preacher. He believed everybody was saved. When Christ died on the cross, there's no conditions. You don't have to be baptized. You don't have to do nothing but die and get a new body. But anyway, him and Will, they set up, burnt the midnight oil talking in front of the fire. Will Moore, he told John B. about all this stuff was happening, bad. He told him, he said, Will Moore, there's a witch in this country. Got you bewitched. Absolutely beyond any doubt. In the morning, we get up and eat breakfast. You send your boy about 5 or 6 miles the other side of Buckhorn. He can ride over there. Old man Anthony Morris is a preacher. He lives on Gaze Creek. He has got a library on witchcraft. He knows that stuff. He can tell you what to do. So the next morning, the boy got on the horse, and again he got over there. It was kindly in the evening. So he just stayed all night with Anthony. Anthony was a good old man. And he lectured him on the witchcraft, and read part of books and stuff. And he wrote down the next morning what to do to break the spell. Had to boil some needles in a buttermilk. Put them under the doorsteps. Maybe something else, anyway. And when the witch come in, over top of that potion, that would break the spell. So Wilmore done that. He put that under there. And just in a week or two, everything started smoothing up. Absolutely, they said nothing else bad did not happen. And they firmly believe that as much as they believe the sun was in the sky. They believe that, them older people.
Now, what year would that have been, Lowell?
That'd have been it'd been a little before the lag deal, about 1915 or 16 somewhere.
Now,
Yeah.
were there a lot of witch trials and stuff
There
around
was
in
no
this part of the
witch
country?
trials, but there was a lot of people believed in witches. Absolutely. I know people that said it was witches when I was a boy. And I want to tell you now, Bill Bush, he's lived over there near Chappie, he's over in Perry. He told my grandpa this story. He said his daddy was a witch, or a wizard, whatever you want to say. He said one day he told him, he said, "Daddy, I want to be like you. I want to be able to do all of this stuff, this magic stuff. I want to be a wizard." He said, "All right, son, in the morning we'll go." He said the next morning, before daylight, they took a lantern and an old rifle gun. They went right on top of that hill there, right over there between Gaze Creek and Kenevie. He said they got up there, and he said they got to getting close to daylight. He said his daddy told him, he said, when that sunball comes over that hill yonder, you take that rifle gun, you shoot at that sunball, and you cuss God, and you say, "I hope when I die that I go to Lucifer, my soul." He said, "Daddy, when I die, I hope my soul goes to Jesus Christ." And he said of all the evil looks he ever got, he got from his dad. He said he never saw anything like him. He said he thought he was going to devour him, scared him to death. And he said he turned and went off the hill. And he said he never did name the witchcraft no more. No way in the world. He said he never named it anymore. And you know, the Bible talks about witchcraft. The witch of Endor raised Samuel from the dead. Absolutely. And the Bible talks about that. So, you know, who knows? That's something that's unknown to me. I don't know. But it sounds like it could be true. Now, there was a lot of witches. Now, right up the road here, right across from Quentin Callahan's barn, there's a little holler goes up in there. And it's level. And there's a woman named there in the long ago, they called her Crease Moore, like creases in the garden, Crease. I don't know what her name was. But Aunt Easter Callahan told my grandma she lived across the creek there with Dan Callahan and Dan's wife Emily. She was Dan's mother, Aunt Easter Callahan. And she said she's got to churning. Sat on the porch, and she said her milk had just turned to blue water. Couldn't make no butter. And she said somebody told her, said, "Put you a silver dollar down in your milk and you churn." And said, "You can make butter." And she said she put a silver dollar down in there. And she said that night she was a churning. She looked over there, said old Crease was a walking from one end of the porch to the other, one end to the other. She said she churned, said, "I'll burn your old leather. I will burn your old leather." And she said after a while the butter started coming up, finest butter you ever seen. She said she couldn't make a drop of butter till she put that silver dollar in there. They firmly, beyond a doubt, believe that. They sure did.
And what year would that have been?
That would have been now about 1900 or something like that, yeah. That was a long time ago. Crease Moore, I've often wondered who she was. I don't know a thing about her, but I know the name, they called her that. And she lived in a house right there up on that bank there, straight across from where Quentin's barn is now. That was a long time ago. There was a lot of people could do funny things, they said. They had called it familiar spirits, and so on. And they had this black magic stuff going. That went on for a long time, where you could talk to the dead. You could go out, they was out in Ohio in these cities, and there was nothing here like that. And they went out there, a lot of them did, and paid and went in and talked. And when they started going out, they was about to kill them, they told them, said, the one we talked to ain't even dead. That's my brother or my mother or whatever. They're living. They got the law and they stopped that stuff. None of that goes on anymore that I know anything about. The Bible says the dead knows nothing about the living, nor the living about the dead. The dead knoweth nothing. That's what the Bible says. And I believe what the Bible says more than I would some kind of hocus pocus. But now they was funny people, them old people. I heard them talk about some boys, there's some witches are going to meet in an old abandoned house. And they was going to go there, and they was schooling them to be witches. They told them one night, said, we ain't got nothing to ride to the house. Said, we got nothing to ride whatsoever. They told them, said, we'll witch them 2 bull calves there into horses. You can ride them. They went out to the barn when they got ready to go, and there stood 2 of the finest horses you ever looked at. They told them witches, they said, don't you name God's name in no way. Don't name God's name. They started up to the old house, and one of them boys' horses jumped a ditch. He said, boys, I've got the best GD horse I ever was on. And it turned to a bull calf. He sat in the straddle of a bull calf, changed back, used God's name. It's old stories now, old time stories. I've heard old people talk about that stuff a lot. Absolutely. Now, there was a lot of people. Jim Mays was a dear friend of mine. He's Henry Mays' boy, and Jim believed in witches. He come out there, Jasper Mays is the man, helped the man take the woman's leg off, and I guess Jasper believed in them. I can't say as I heard Jasper tell no witch tale, but I heard Jim talk about it, about him turning him into a horse and riding him all over Breathitt County and everywhere. I heard him say, he'd wake up for morning so sore and stiff, he couldn't hardly get out of the bed. So now that's what they believed, absolutely. They sure did. Pretty big thing back in them times, absolutely. I want to thank everybody for your continuing support, watching me, and just hang around. I'll be back with more.